Yeah, Andre Munckton, yeah, on behalf of myself and my wife. This is my final my submission to the Northern Territory fracking inquiry. For me and my wife, I've been around the Elliot area, Beetaloo area all my life. My wife was born, and so was her family, born on the property. I had it for about, I bought it off them. I had it for about 12 years and done some development work on it. And I've walked, me and the late Clancy Bostock's walked a lot of the country, left our vehicles where we could, and was putting in some more new bores, but I really wanted to see how much water flooded down. The Beetaloo Creek heads at Munckton, and there's about a 15-kilometre gap between there and the waters from the top end, which comes from the Lemon River and goes to the OT station, which is the outstation, and was one of the main parts of Beetaloo. There's two stations, and we had a look, and me and the late Clancy now used to walk through the place 4 or 5 days at a time and look around, and we just couldn't believe the amount of water that was coming down from the top. And we could see it when we was at the Beetaloo. The Beetaloo waters are dark water, but you could see it a clear water when the other one joins up. And that, when we had a look at, it was up around the waist deep and that, and there was a hell of a lot more water going down there than what we thought coming down. So we thought that the areas that I was going to put the bores, I had to reconsider and shift them, otherwise the motors would have been underwater. And I'm very concerned about the gas and anything like that going there, because when they do the fracking actually fracks the ground, but it actually comes up outside of the casing and into the water table, and then you get bubbles up the top. So no doubt if someone would go into that area and have a look when it's underwater and fly in or whatever, and then do a test on those wells, you'll find that they're leaking. And there's 2 wells, both Owen 1 and 2, and the McIntyre wells are right in those water areas, and they've been closed off because of they've contaminated the water. But they'd be still doing it because you can block the inside off, but you can't block the outside off where the fracking is. And this is, I would like it very much for the inquiry to investigate, start taking samples around these wells when they're with waters and that, because it's bad for the country. And what happens, you know, they said the basin's got a lifetime of 30 years, but what happens after that? The water's going to be poisoned, and there's a lot of towns and Aboriginal communities and stations that rely on the Georgina Basin, and which now is called the Beetaloo Oil Basin, which is under that Georgina Basin. But Georgina Basin's a very big basin, and a lot of people depend on it. So I'd like the inquiry to, you know, take some more samples and have a really close look at it, because it ain't safe, and that's it. And I won't have it that it's safe, because when I left school, I used to be with the late Bill Gorry, and we was putting in water bores, and it was like winning a casket when you struck the water, and how precious it was, and how much they spoke well of it and that. And you know, today they're going down a lot more deeper and starting to, you know, when they frack they use explosives, and the amount of material and poisons that's going down that well, people will be dying of cancer and every other disease. If it's not our generation, it's going to be the generations after us and the ones after that again. So I reckon the whole lot should be stopped myself, and whoever agrees with it, well, you know, people should speak up and while they got a chance to. So that's what I reckon about it anyway. And I know the Beetaloo and the area and OT very well, and you know, spent all my life at Elliot. I spent 30 years truck driving all around, but Elliot was always our base. So you know, I think I know what I'm talking about, and I've actually seen the, you know, and I've spoken to a geologist that was there, and they showed me maps, and they wasn't no longer working there, but they showed me stuff and told me stuff that I didn't know, and I am very concerned about it. As a former pastoralist, I got a fair idea of you know, the contamination that would be caused, and what concerns me is, and I think everyone else around should be concerned, that eventually that the poisons and that stuff that floats to the surface and then they're holding ponds and stuff like that could eventually get into the meat. And then what happens to our meat industry is that just, you know, goes to the wall, or everyone going to stand up and, and have a decent look at all this? There's been an inquiry before, I know, but it wants to be a thorough inquiry, because it ain't no joke, and your wife's family is very concerned about it after being born on the land, and they was there from the 1800s and that, and and they must, they're very concerned of all the wildlife and everything else. You see dead birds around, there's wells and that there, and whether it's just, there's got to be something that's causing that, and that's after the floods and that, which happens every year and that. And no, my concern is that it's going to poison people. This stuff, if it's not our generation, it's going to be the one after, and it's going to get into the meat, because even before, years ago, we were spraying the Parkinsonia trees, and I had cattle on adjustment there, and they was concerned about the pellets might get into the meat and poison the meat. So they get a far worse situation with this fracking and the stuff they pour down the wells there, and that's got more of a chance of getting into the meat than most other stuff and that. And this is my concern, is it could be the end of our cattle industry around that areas and around that basin, and further on, because the Georgina Basin, it goes right up to Rockland Station near Camberwell, and it goes up just outside of the 7 Mile and Tennant Creek here, and it goes right up the top. It takes years to fill in that, and you've got all these communities depending on it. So it's not only the people around that basin is going to be affected. It goes right back to where the Georgina Basin starts and ends. And all of those people, which it's a far larger area than just the Beetaloo Basin that they're talking about, and what I'm talking about here now. And it's far more a larger area that I don't think people's even realise that. Have a good look and find out, where these basins lie in that, and then you'll understand. They'll understand of how large an area, and there's going to be people are going to be affected if these things get poisoned. And you can't tell me that those wells that's been blocked off are not still contaminating the underground water now. So this is a concern of mine, and concerns my wife's family. It concerns my wife, and it should concern everyone else around as well. And I'm very upset about it. Pouring a lot of money in, and they really should be, doing more and just having a good look at it and make it a clear decision on it, that it should not go ahead. That's what I'm saying, Because, I'd also like to say that the recent fracking that done on Munckton station is we've already had experiences on that. That's going to, be the exact thing that's happened on Beetaloo with the closure of the 2 Owen wells and the McIntyre wells failed, which got in and contaminated the water in that. And it's once it's fracked and the water starts to drip down, it causes an acid thing very similar to MacArthur River Mine, where they're having trouble when they get the rocks out, and it just turns in, when it's in the open, it turns into acid. And if you put water in it, it is acid, and there's a haze there all the time. All this is be bubbling away, still in those failed wells. But I'd like to recommend a total ban on it, because the huge cost to the parcel industry is just, you're just not going to recover, after it. And they say it's, there's 30 years supply there. So what happens after the 30 years? You've got no more water. So how else are you going to, what are you going to pipe the water from the top end rivers and bring it down? So you're going to completely ruin the Georgina Basin. And the Georgina Basin's a hell of a lot bigger than what the Beetaloo Basin that the oil mob call, because it takes in a hell of a lot more towns and stuff like that. I'd like the inquiry to really look into that and see a much larger area that's going to be affected by the Georgina Basin area, not just around that area, a hell of a lot larger area. And I think that even parcel stations right up to where it starts at Rockland Station and that around that area, like that, they've got to drink the water as well. And how long does it take for this contamination to eventually get right through the lot? So what I'm saying is it should be really stopped, because it's going to contaminate a lot more than just the Beetaloo Basin. And I think that a lot of parcelists should be really concerned about it myself. And that's about that's about all I'd like to say, is just a total ban on it. And I think that'd be the best for the country, best for the environment, best for all the sacred sites through the area. It's everything. You can't go into the creeks and be drinking the water, because you'd be drinking the rubbish that's put down the wells that comes to the surface, and everyone gets affected. So it should be banned. I reckon that's all I would want to say about it. I think it's wrong. It's definitely wrong, and you've only got to look at the experience of other countries. And what they've done down south, they've put a total ban on places down south, and in America they've had a lot of trouble with it too. But they're blaming the earthquakes around there, the small tremors they've been having, for the plates to be shifted through the rubbish that they pour down there. And this is what some of the top scientists have been saying, that they're blaming it. So we don't want that sort of a situation coming here, but just the stuff that goes down the well and is enough to concern me with it. And so I reckon a total ban is what should be done. Yeah, I've got a map here, and it can show you, like the Beetaloo Creek heads at Munckton, the water there, and then you've got a bit of a gap, and then the water comes actually from the Lemon Bight into the outstation called OT Downs. It floods joins into when this other Munckton one and Beetaloo joins into Beetaloo Creek, which is white water. You can tell when the water's coming from the top end, if there's big floods up the top, which it always happens every year. And any landholder that's in the area should be really concerned, because it's not just confined to Beetaloo Basin area. It's they'll all be affected, because that water comes in and then it turns clear. Then the creek runs right around through Newcastle waters. They should be concerned as well, and it goes around to a place that people know as Longreach Waterhole, and then eventually ends up into Lake Woods. And then when that's full, there's sort of bit of a bank around it, but it breaks out and floods out into the desert. So, any parcels around that it's not confined to that, just to the one area. And I think they should be all concerned about it. And if any wants to give it go ahead, and that they really should be reconsidering their decision, I'd reckon, because I have walked through the area, and it the contamination there spreads, and even though that they've blocked off the other wells, it's that when the flood's through there, it's mixing with the underground water. That goes into everyone, what the stuff that they're pouring down there as well, and then the floods get through it, and then that around the boreholes and that it will get in, because there's a hell of a lot of pressure underneath the ground there when they frack in that, and it comes up on the outside of the casing. The inside, yes, they do a good job inside. It'll last as long as the casing doesn't rust, and that'll take a fair few years. But my concern is that it comes on the outside, and there's got no way in the world that they can block off the outside. I don't care what anyone says. And any inquiry the inquiry is going now, they should look more closely into that on the outside. And that goes it goes on the outside, it feeds into the underground water supply, and then it goes right up the top, and then with the force of the gas and the big flood like that, the water comes down, it can go down into that, on the side of the well, get contaminated into your underground water supply, and then what happens? So anyone that's thinking of giving the okay, they ought to reconsider, because, it's not only them that's going to be suffering, it's the generations after, And I think that the inquiry should have a much more closer look at these things.
Yeah. Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Andrew Munckton.
Yeah.
Yes, hello, Mr. Munckton. My name's Justice Rachel Pepper. I'm chair of the Scientific Inquiry into Hydraulic Fracturing in the Northern Territory. We have just watched your very useful video. Thank you very much for pre-recording that. Let me just introduce the panel, so you're not perhaps too surprised when you hear their voices. I'll just get them to say hello as I introduce their names. Professor Brian Priestley.
Hello, Mr. Munckton.
Dr. Alan Anderson.
Hello, Mr. Munckton.
Professor Barry Hart.
Hello, Mr. Munckton.
Dr. Vaughan Beck.
Good afternoon, Mr. Munckton.
And Dr. David Ritchie.
Good afternoon, Mr. Munckton.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Munckton. I wanted to perhaps just, first of all, is there anything else that you wish to tell the inquiry?
Yeah, I'd like them if they could get a copy of Volume 1, Northern Territory, Water Northern Territory Volume 1. It was put out by the Department of Mines and Energy, Water Resources Division. It'll show the water basins and stuff like that in a much clearer forum and that. And also, is there anyone testing those failed wells, the Owen and the McIntyre wells on the station below there? They blocked them off because they said they was leaking and that, and getting into the water. I'd just like to know if anyone's done any testing of them, and is it possible if they could, during the wet season, if they could land around those wells on a dry area, of course, and take some samples of the near the wellheads and see what it's like there. And also, is there any water testing for the people at Elliot and surrounding places there, just to see that there's no contamination in the water and that, if that can be done. That's about all I want to say on that, I think it is. And what compensation is the pastoralists and the TOs getting for land access and all that? Is there any compensation at all they're getting? Or?
I can't answer those questions, Mr. Munckton, but can you tell me a little bit more about these failed wells, please?
Yeah, there's two called Owen wells and one called the McIntyre wells. And they failed and they said that they contaminated the waters. That's why they was closed up by. And I don't know whether it's still leaching into the water or has anyone been there to test them or anything like that.
Do you know whose wells they were?
I wouldn't be real sure on that. No, I'm not real sure on that.
Okay.
The information through the Freedom of Information, I think it was, and passed it on and said that they was leaching in, contaminated the water, and that's about all the information I got out of it. So I just wanted to know if anyone's tested it to see if it's still happening, or even though they've been sealed off, if it's still happening or anything. If someone, if it's been tested, or can it be tested, or what's,
I can't. Again, Mr. Munckton, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. We're not from the government, so we don't know that. That's why I'm asking you about those wells. So, are they unconventional wells? Were they wells that were fracked, or are they just wells that were sort of drilled? What sort of wells were they?
Well, they didn't get down to the full depth. I understand it was past the water table and that. And it seems to one bit bent or something like that. And so no, I'm not too sure if they were. One of them may have been a fracked well. I'm not real positive on that. It's just a bit of the information that I got back. That's all. And said they got it through the Freedom of Information, and that was about all that was passed on. So it's concerned me that it has contaminated the water, and I just wanted to know if it can be tested and all that.
So have you got some information through Freedom of Information request, did you say?
A person got it for me, yes.
Okay.
Passed it on a while back now.
Do you still have a copy of, Mr. Munckton, do you still have a copy of that information?
They sent it on my phone, but I'm not too sure if I got the copy of the whole lot of it at all. I swapped SIM cards over to a new phone there a while back, and I think I've deleted a lot of photos and other stuff that was on there. So I'm not real sure of that, but I think they should be able to get onto the Freedom of Information and get it through there again and get the full copy of it.
Who was the person who provided you with this information?
It may have been GetUp or something. I think it was a person from GetUp.
I don't know. All right. Well, if you are able to obtain that information again, certainly please send it through to the inquiry, because we'd be most keen to have a look at those that information and those wells. We'll do a little bit of research ourselves to see if we can get to the bottom of it. But I must say that's the first I've heard of 2 wells that have failed and are now, you say, contaminating the water.
Yeah, they contaminated the water, drinking water,
All right, and is it in and around those wells that you said, I think in your video submission, that you saw some dead wildlife?
Yeah, there's wildlife dead around the wells there. Yeah, there's hell of a lot of water comes down from the top end and joins in with the Beetaloo Creek. There's a lot more water than you think there, because the Beetaloo Creek's a milky colour water, and then when you see the clean water coming through, we'll let you know that the water from OT, which is the outstation, and that's all coming through, and that there's a lot of dead stuff around. I've seen there before, because me and the late Clancy Glostock we used to walk around that area in the wet and that there too, and well in the dry as well. But we'd have a good look on, for places for bores where we was going to put them, and we wanted to see whether they're going to be underwater or not. And I'm pretty well surprised to know the depth of the water really. And so they've got something, they've picked up something to be dropping, around dropping, poison. They've picked up something. So, it's just not an ordinary bird kill sort of thing. It's just, there was quite a few of them there.
Okay. What sort of wildlife did you see that was dead?
Those cranes and that, those black and white cranes, and they're all walking around. They walk around the water edge and that a fair bit. And the black cockatoos, there's several of those, but mainly was those black and white cranes, and that was there. They must have picking up something, because they always got their beak in water, and they're picking up stuff and that. So it's something they've picked up there somewhere along the line there. So I'm not saying that it come out of them, but it was around those areas and that. So it's something there that they've, I've never seen a amount like that, but you get 20 here and then 6 or 7 further on something like that. And I said, there's something like that. It's not not hawks or anything like that kill them, because there's just too many of them.
And how long ago was it that, roughly, just approximately, how long ago was it that you saw this?
It'd be 4 or 5 years ago, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be that long, yeah. Because my wife has got her parents laid to rest there, and we try to get out there once a year to visit the site, the graves and that. So, and we might have a bit of a walk around and stuff like that. So it'd be that long ago, yeah. It would be.
Okay.
I haven't been able to move around much lately, but that was the last time that I remember I was walking around in that there. So.
All right, thank you. Mr. Munckton, I'm now going to ask if there are any members of the panel who would like to ask you a question. If you can't hear them, please just say so, all right? But yes. I think Professor Barry Hart would like to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Munckton, and thank you very much for your first-hand knowledge and information on the surface water resources. I must say that's really the first time that we've heard any first-hand information on what happens basically each wet season. So great stuff. We need a lot more of that information. So if I could just ask you a couple of questions about your experience walking in those waters at the wet season. So you were saying that there's basically two, the way I understood it, 2 creeks. There's one that's coming down from north. The creek you call Beetaloo, is it also known as Newcastle Creek?
Yes, the head of it starts at Munckton Station, off the high country at Munckton.
So this is
runs down past Beetaloo and into Newcastle waters and around to Lake Woods.
Okay,
that's the Beetaloo Creek.
I've got the system. And so
then the other one. Yeah.
So the time you experienced when you and your mate were walking in that, is that the sort of experience each wet season?
Yeah, it is every wet season, when you get good rains and that. And you get good rains up the top end up near Burralilly. If you get a cyclone or something in up there, and there'll be a hell of a lot more water come down.
Yep.
And if there's not much rain up the top end, well, it'll get backfilled, off the Beetaloo Creek itself, will fill up there. But between the Beetaloo Creek and the stuff that comes down from AT, it goes right up to Lemon Bight, and it comes down into a place called October Creek and runs into AT where there's a spring and all that. Seems to be a floodplain there about 15 k's, I suppose, but that overflows, and then you'll see the clear water coming.
Okay.
And when when you're at the station, well, you'll say, well, now there comes the OT water now, and there's a great volume of it coming down, and it will fill up the Lake Woods. So there's no problem with that.
So after the initial flush of that water, depending upon the intensity of the wet season, how long so presumably there are some depressions, there are water holes.
A lot of water holes, a lot of creeks, mate.
A lot of so how long do they last through the dry or not?
Yes. There's creeks right up in Beetaloo and that, and every now and again you'll get a 10-year drought sort of, and then even the Lake Woods dries up. And when I was leaving school there, we used to go with an old driller that used to have the old type drill, and we put in bores where the owner said, well, put it in there, but it's just like a black soil plain, and it was actually Lake Woods. And I'm told, but I didn't see it, but I'm told that where we put the bores in, they built the turkey nest tank, the water tank, and they said that was covered, the water was that high that it was covered. And a bloke from the water resources was also telling us there that he went out with his boat and that to, just trying to get some depth. So he said the waves was that fierce that he had to turn back, and there's a lot of wind on that. And it's probably about 30 mile wide and about, about 30 mile wide it'll be, I suppose, that lake, and or a bit more.
That's Lake Woods.
That's Lake Woods, yeah.
Yep.
And it was pretty deep in that, and he said it was too much for him with a little dinghy. He said he had to turn back because of the waves. And it surprised me really that the tank that where the owner said to put the bore, and that was in there, but it was flooded, and the turkey nest tank's quite high, and holds a fair bit of water, and that water was right over the top of that. They said so that we wouldn't have been right, but the bore wouldn't have been right on the edge of the lake. Then that would have been a few k's into the lake itself. But the owner said put it there, that'll be about the edge of it, so they knew where they wanted it, so we had to put it there. But I only used to be, just a few, like a week here and a week there, and that, giving a hand and that, so I just picked up, a lot of stuff there and that, and used to know, we've always taught how precious water was and that.
Yep.
And, and the bores and that, so.
So could I just come back a little bit further towards the station? Back into the area where Origin and I think a little bit further across east, maybe Santos exploration permit. It seems to me, and I think the panel would get this very much from your account of what it's like in a normal wet season, is that we really should be cautioning, or maybe even recommending banning any well drilling in those drainage basins.
Well, that'd be the best idea, I reckon, because there's a hell of a risk there,
I thought that was what you were suggesting, very much so.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, look, the other thing, just to follow on from Justice Pepper's comment about asking you about those failed wells, and your request to us to do some sampling, that's not our role. We don't have enough time for it, but I've got to say to you that one of the very high priority issues that exercising our mind at the moment is the whole point about baseline. What's the situation in the regions, in the potential gas regions? What's the situation from the terrestrial point of view, from the groundwater point of view, from the aquatic ecosystem point of view, and a range of other things. So we believe very strongly that has to be done. And while there's some information, you pointed to some from water resources, we don't think it's adequate. So I think you can rest assured that that will have to be something that has to happen. Baseline, good baseline studies.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, okay, no worries, mate. Yep.
Yes, was there anyone else who had a question? This will be Dr. Alan Anderson.
Thanks, Mr. Munckton. I've just got a question about the leaky wells.
Yes.
What's your understanding that what's leaking out of them? What are the contaminants?
Well, it's the stuff that they pour down the well there, and I was sent a list there by a bloke who was a geologist, and he said, I think it was in the Sunday Territorian, and he said to have a look at that, and that shows you the stuff that after he's done all these trips and everywhere around Australia, and he's been overseas and that, and he said this is what goes down the wells. And I was shocked to see that uranium and all that stuff was down there. I just couldn't believe it. I said, how can anyone do that, put that down there? Because when the fracking mine, there's the thing that when they frack, the inside of the casing, yes, they've done a good job over years, and it'll last until the casing rusts out, which is probably 20, 30 years or something like that. But when they frack, the fraction comes up and hits the outside of that casing and goes right up and up into the water table, and then it forces its way to the top. And that's the stuff that I'm thinking that's coming back up to the top, and it could be the stuff that's killing the wildlife and everything else. And there's a lot of Aboriginal sacred sites there in form of trees. Now, if you've got some poisonous stuff down in there and that gets up into the water things where they have their tanks or whatever it is, the stuff that they mix up in there, and that gets flooded out on these water plains and that gets flooded out. Well, then it just gets mixed up with everything. It gets mixed up into the water creeks and everything. It's just spread. So that's what I'm saying is if someone can do some testing on those wells and the other wells that's being put there. And, the government used to have a thing called the water resources, and they was out nearly all year, and only in the wet, and they done a terrific job, those people. They used to be out and testing water in towns and all that and that, but somehow that was funding was out and they was closed down, and that just seems a shame. But if we had something like that again to make sure and go around to these towns and where this drilling and fracking has been taking place and testing the drinking water supply that people's got to drink, it'd be a big help, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, that's about it.
All right, we've got another question at this time from Dr. Vaughan Beck.
Yes, Mr. Munckton. Just a couple of points of clarification. When were the wells drilled? Can you give me an approximate date on that, please?
No, I'm not real sure of the date. It's probably 4 or 5 years ago or something like that, 6 years ago.
Right.
It could have been. It could have been Sweet Pea, a company called Sweet Pea or something like that. I'm not real sure of the company that drilled it, or about the time. It would have been 6 years or something like that ago, I think.
Right.
I wouldn't be real accurate. I couldn't swear it was that, but I'm sure it was about 6 years ago or something.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Just to help me locate where the wells were drilled, you in the video had a very nice map of the exploration permits that had been granted. Are you able to identify where those wells were drilled in respect to those exploration permits? Number?
I think it's somewhere around a place that we call Duck Hole.
Right.
It's another watercourse that comes from. It runs into the Beetaloo Creek, and it comes from Mungy Station. There's a big black soil plain there out on Mungy, just over the boundary of Beetaloo. And that gathers a lot of water and that, and it runs through the little creek there, Duck Hole and Cow Lagoon, like it's called, and then it runs into the Beetaloo Creek. Right. And it's somewhere in that area there, now, to be exact, because yes, that's about where it is.
Yes, thank you very much. And you mentioned that Sweet Pea may have been the company that drilled the actual wells.
They may have been, yes.
Yes.
They may have been. I wouldn't be 100%
No,
sure of that.
I understand that. That's fine.
Yeah.
And do you know the company who had granted the exploration permit over that piece of land? Are you talking?
Probably Falcon Oil. Before that, there was a company called Pacific Oil and Gas, because I put bores in around the place and I was getting brown coal out of it, and I thought, well, under that could be, black coal and could be oil or something, and I got in touch with CRA, it was, I think it was, and before long they formed a company called Pacific Oil and Gas, and they was out there in that time doing some drilling and that, and I wouldn't let them they'd like to keep the camp away from the station because there's a lot of kids that running around there, around the house, and I put a road around for them. And there was a well, and they said that they couldn't go deep enough because the rig that they had at that time didn't go deep enough. But 100 yards away, they put a bore in, a water bore as well, which they was using, and I got them to well the depth and everything on it. And I shone a mirror, or rear vision mirror off my motor car down the well after when they left and had a look, and I could see an odd bubble in the water. So I don't know what was causing that. There's some leakage there somewhere that shouldn't be really happening. And I just screwed it back up, and I told the manager about it. That it was good drinking water because I drank the water out of it. There's no ways about that. And it was good drinking water. It wasn't all that deep either. And and I don't know what's happened to that one either. That was done by Pacific Oil and Gas, that one. And then a geologist, he come up. He said, I know we're not allowed up at the station, but he said I've bought a beer up for you, and I bought some maps up for you, and I want to show you that what they're telling you and what you don't know, what you know and what you don't know. And I said, oh, well, look, sit down and no worries, we'll have a talk. And he showed me the thing, and he said, oh, well, look, Pacific Oil and Gas is going to fold up in a few weeks' time and everything else. He said, if you've got any shares in it, which I didn't have, you'd be going to be a lot of people burnt on it. But he showed me the stuff, how deep it was, and he said they haven't even got enough when they blocked it off now. He said because it wasn't deep enough, they blocked it off, and he said my concern is I can't work for a company like this because he said the amount of concrete that they put in is not enough. And he said that's going to start moving. And then what if they hit the gas at that depth that they went down? Well, that's probably the cause of the bubbles that I saw in the well, in the water well. So that's another thing that really the government wants to check out that one too as well. And I don't know whether the late Johnny Dunnicliffe, I took him through and his wife through when they was at Beetaloo, and I showed them all the sacred sites and the other sites that around there and the waters and where I tended to put the bores down and stuff like that. And he was taking it all in, and I stayed there. We camped at OT for a couple of nights and had a good look around, and got on very well. And he wanted to know more about where I was going to put the bores and stuff. And he says all good areas, good positions where you put them and that. But since that, he's done a hell of a lot more work and that on the place. It's a credit to him the way they've done it. But I done my best to point out, like there's a lot of graves was there too as well. I said, if you're going to do any clearing, I said, this is, put the compass on it and get the bearings and that. I said, this is where their graves are here in these areas. So if you can avoid clearing, with the bulldozer anywhere here, if you put the new fence line in, I'd appreciate that. And he said, oh, that's just thanks for pointing those out. And so.
Thank you very much for that additional information. That's been most helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Doctor. Now you're going to hear from Dr. David Ritchie.
Yeah. Oh, Mr. Munckton, it just confirmed that the area that you're talking about on Beetaloo, is that now Aboriginal land? Was that part of the land claim?
No.
Okay.
No.
I was just thinking that when you were saying you were taking some people around looking at sacred sites, I just missed the name of the person that you were talking about.
No, the sacred sites was the bloke from the Sacred Sites Authority. I took him first years before that.
Yeah, was that John Dimmick?
It wasn't John Dimmick.
Okay.
And your name, we used to work for, who do you work for?
I used to work for Sacred Sites, that's why you know my name
Sacred
too.
Sites Authority, yeah. Well, there was a bloke from the Sacred Sites Authority now.
John Avery.
Took around there, and me and the late Tansy Bostock now again.
Yeah.
And George, the late George Bostock was there as well. And what we done is he put a compass on the thing and ripped the bearings down of each site. And there was other sites that was further in that they had a different type of burial, and some was in the trees.
Yeah.
They put them up on top of the trees and all that. So that's why I stopped the airstrip from getting extended. They wanted to extend the airstrip, and I put a stop to that straight away. The Transport Works wanted to put it in, and the bloke from the Sacred Sites Authority now done that. So all those compass bearings, and that's what I showed the late John Dunnicliffe when he bought the place.
Oh, yeah.
I showed him where all these places were and told him to avoid these places. And that. So that's about it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Munckton, I think that's the end of the questions from the panel. Can I just say on behalf of the panel and the inquiry, thank you very much for your video submission and for taking the time to speak to us today on the telephone, to tell us about these wells. We are going to do a little bit more digging and find out hopefully what the story is with these wells. You've given us some really important information, and certainly I think we're very interested in following it up. So thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for taking the time, as I said, to record the video and submit it to the inquiry. We're very grateful, and have a good afternoon.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you.